Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so I want you to picture an empty chair in a jail control room, right? At first glance, it might just look like, a skipped shift, someone called in sick. But in reality, that empty chair represents a massive breakdown in basic constitutional safety. Today, we're diving into Colorado's correctional staffing crisis. Now, it'd be super easy to just brush this off as some boring bureaucratic HR headache, but as we're going to see in the source data today, this is an incredibly urgent, dynamic, systemic issue, and it impacts not just the safety of these facilities, but the safety of your broader community.
Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at why this is way more than just a human resources problem. Then, we'll explore what's actually driving the shortage, the incredibly dangerous overtime cycle it creates, the upcoming 2026 jail standards, and finally, the community impact and some potential solutions. So Section 1, more than human resources. Let's look at the systemic breakdown.
We really need to completely reframe how we view a job vacancy here, because correctional officer shortages are absolutely not just an HR problem. Think about it. When a typical business is short-staffed, a project gets delayed, right? Big deal. But when a jail lacks adequate staff, it is literally a failure to meet basic constitutional security standards. By law, jails have to maintain 24-hour coverage, period. It's about safety and access to basic services. So a vacant post isn't just a minor inconvenience, it is a direct threat to basic security.
And this brilliantly illustrates the immediate ripple effects of understaffing. When posts go unfilled, these are your immediate operational casualties. Facilities suddenly struggle to safely transport people or even just supervise the housing units. Access to things like programming, case management, and basic services for incarcerated folks, that simply evaporates. We're even seeing wild situations where managers are forced to completely abandon their administrative duties and jump directly into security posts just to keep the doors open. The whole operation just fundamentally weakens. Moving right along to Section 2, what drives the shortage? Let's unpack these overlapping pressures. Listen. There is no single magical cause here. It's a series of heavy overlapping pressures. Let's be real, the demands of this job are absolutely brutal. It is physically taxing, highly emotional work. It demands mandatory weekends, nights, and holidays away from your family. So retention naturally becomes a massive hurdle, because experienced staff look at these grueling conditions and realize, hey, I could literally just leave for a job with better pay, way less stress, and a totally predictable schedule. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the inherent paradox facility administrators are facing right now. On one hand, you've got intense competition. County jails are out there fighting state prisons, community corrections, and private facilities for the exact same limited labor pool. But on the other hand, you have severe hiring friction. Jails desperately need strict background and criminal record checks, right? Those safeguards are absolutely vital, but in a tight labor market, those necessary checks add months to the hiring timeline. And while you're waiting, those posts sit vacant and your candidates just go find work somewhere else.
Which brings us to Section 3, the dangerous overtime cycle. Let's look at this incredibly dangerous loop.
This is the ground reality inside the facility. It's a vicious, almost unbreakable feedback loop. It kicks off with Step 1, vacant posts. To cover those empty chairs, administrators are forced to rely on Step 2, which is increased overtime. Now, sure, mandatory overtime might successfully cover a shift today, but it directly causes Step 3, severe staff fatigue and burnout. And, well, what happens when your staff is entirely burnt out? You hit Step 4, lower retention. People just quit, which throws the whole facility right back to Step 1, but with even more vacant posts this time. It is a localized crisis that aggressively feeds on itself.
And the human toll here is just staggering. For both the remaining staff and the incarcerated populations, simply complying with basic health, mental care, and safety standards becomes incredibly difficult on the ground. When you have reduced capabilities like slower response times, less movement, fewer rehabilitative programs, those directly cause heightened risks. We're talking more facility lockdowns, totally unmonitored housing units, and terrifyingly slow responses to fights or medical emergencies. Basic security coverage isn't something facilities can just improvise indefinitely without someone eventually getting hurt.
Okay, Section 4, the 2026 jail standards. Let's see how Colorado is rewriting the blueprint. Let's look at how this builds. Right now, today, facilities are actively battling these ongoing shortages. But the state is stepping in, requiring annual staffing plan reviews to force jails to clearly identify their posts and job functions. This is all building toward a massive deadline, July 1, 2026. That is when updated, unusually clear new standards will be strictly enforced. The state is basically laying down the law, telling facilities that staffing is a core safety issue, not just some optional management preference. And here is perhaps the most heavy-hitting standard to come out of this entire policy. The guidelines specifically state that jails experiencing ongoing staffing shortages, quote, may consider reducing daily population levels. I mean, wow. That is a massive practical acknowledgement from the state. They are flat out saying that if a jail cannot safely staff every single bed, reducing the population pressure is practically one of the only immediate effective tools available to restore constitutional safety. It proves staffing and population are inextricably linked.
However, the state is also making it very clear that this isn't some rigid, one-size-fits-all mandate. Adequate staffing depends entirely on a facility's unique makeup. I mean, how big is the jail? What's the physical configuration? Where is it located? What exact services are being provided? And what is the security classification of the people inside? A tiny rural jail has vastly different minimum requirements than a massive urban detention center, and these new standards actually reflect that reality on the ground.
Finally, Section 5, Community Impact and Solutions. Let's talk about the ripple effect.
So the crucial point we need to take away here is this. A short-staffed jail directly burdens your local community. When a facility lacks officers, that heavy burden shifts outward to local sheriffs and county governments. Court operations start to slow down because, well, there's literally no one to move individuals to their hearings. Law enforcement transport gets totally bogged down, which actually pulls deputies off of patrolling your own neighborhoods just to manage jail logistics. Mental health responses get deeply strained, and ultimately, public confidence in the entire justice system is shaken.
This is exactly why the year 2026 is going to be so pivotal. Not only do those new jail standards take effect, but as of May 2026, lawmakers are actively considering prison population management measures that are heavily tied to bed vacancy rates. This really proves that the state gets it. They realize they simply cannot manage physical capacity and staffing pressures separately anymore. They are absolutely two sides of the exact same coin.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly important question. The documents clearly show that Colorado understands the stakes here, right? The standards are set, the burnout loop is recognized, and that community ripple effect is mapped out. But the real challenge isn't just writing a smart standard on a piece of paper, it's execution. How do we actually turn smart policy into a real, trained, alert staff member on every single shift, ensuring safety and human dignity inside these walls? That is the absolute central question lawmakers and administrators have to answer between now and 2026. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.